Okay, hi everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started, and if any other people come, we can just let them in a little bit late. But hi, I'm Devanshi Katari, and I'm the founder and executive director of Power Up with STEAM. Our three-part mission is from clubs to colleges to careers, and this is our mission to empower girls to pursue STEM in the future. So to accomplish our club's aspect of our mission, we aim to pair high school mentees or mentors with middle school and elementary school mentees to give them a brief overview of like what clubs, what courses, and everything to pick to get acquainted for STEM in high school. And for high schoolers and middle schoolers, we aim to bring in college students and industry professionals who are female and have them give a talk about basically their experiences in the field. So today we have with us Abby Schmid, who is a STEM researcher and a recent graduate of the University of Chicago with a bachelor's degree in Computational and Applied Mathematics. She's also pursuing her post-bachelors research at the Los Alamos National Laboratory currently, and she will be pursuing a PhD in engineering science at CU Boulder in this August. So Abby, I'll let you take the stage.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides. Let's do this. Let's do this. One second. Okay, let's go with that. Cool. So yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Abby. I am currently a post-bachelor's student at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. And yeah, I did my undergraduate at the University of Chicago, graduated last June, so about a year ago, with a degree in computational and applied math. So I'm just gonna talk with you guys a little bit about how I got to this point, things I've learned, and yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
Awesome. So I just have a startup general question for you. What was your high school experience like? Like, what classes did you take? What clubs were you involved in? Any outside extracurricular activities that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, so I was actually quite busy in high school. I was in the IB program, which is very similar to AP, and took a bunch of classes in the music program. I was in the marching band, as you can see over here, and was in the jazz band and the concert band, and I played the trumpet, which was very fun. I was also on a ski team for the local area. I went to school in Colorado, so that was a big part of life in Colorado. And I was very fortunate to go to a high school that had an engineering program. And so kind of throughout my time in high school, I got to look at a couple of different areas of engineering, which was exciting. So when I was a freshman, took kind of this introductory modeling class where you make a bunch of computer-aided models on the computer. When I was a sophomore, I did this bioengineering class. This picture over here is from a little project that we did where we took E. coli and we put this protein in it that makes it glow pink. So you can see it growing on the plate there. When I was a junior, took an aerospace class where we did things like build little gliders, and here this is from a project where we were making airfoils. So these are chunks of foam, and we cut them into the shape of an airfoil, and then we had like a little wind tunnel so you could see how well they were doing. Other random projects, we had like robotics things always going on in the lab. And then as a senior, I took computer science and learned some Java programming before going to college. So that was a good introduction to engineering for sure. And then kind of as I was going into college, was thinking about doing aerospace engineering, and then clearly changed my mind and did some applied math. I was taking calculus at the end of high school and really liked that. I think prior to taking calculus, I wasn't the hugest fan of math, to be completely honest. I was like taking all these classes and I felt like they were just saying, you know, you're going to use this later, you're going to use this later, and that didn't appeal to me. But as soon as we reached calculus, it is so ingrained into how we think about the world, and you know, has really direct applications to physics and engineering and things like that. And so finally being in a math class, where we were learning things that were very applicable to the real world and you could use to think about modeling the world around you, I found was very exciting and wanted to keep doing more of that. So yeah.
Awesome. Apart from activities that you did within school, did you have any experience with research during high school? Any specific projects that you worked on that you thought were very memorable?
Yes, definitely. So I only had like one research experience throughout high school, but it was kind of an exciting one. So also as part of this engineering program, basically I was like in a class, and one of our teachers, right here, Mr. Thomas, he, you know, kind of opened something up to the class. I was like, hey, we just got this information about this opportunity for students to send experiments to the International Space Station. Is there anyone in the class who would be interested in doing that? And so me and a couple of my friends, we got together and we wrote a proposal for an experiment. Basically, we wanted to look at the growth cycle of bacteria on the space station and compare it to how bacteria grows on Earth. And so you know, we wrote up this proposal and they selected our proposal. And so we got together a team of other students, again, supported by this same teacher. And I mean, we really did everything from writing that initial proposal and coming up with the idea to designing the entire setup. So the physical constraints of the experiment was that it had to fit in this box that was about this big. It's like the size of a water bottle maybe. And everything had to be fully automated. So, we had a whole team of people who were working on designing all of these inner components. And so that's the stuff that I have up on the slides. This is the box, and then this is kind of the housing that goes inside of it. The idea was that we were going to stick vials, little plastic vials with bacteria into this little gear system, and it would spin. And then we had another group of people working on the sensors and how we would collect the actual data to know if our experiment had worked. And so that involved, it's a little bit hard to see in this picture, but it's a microcontroller, so like a little circuit board with a bunch of sensors attached to it. And it had some lights on it so that we could tell how much light was going through each of the vials to see if the bacteria was actually growing. And then it would record all of the data onto an SD card so that we could get it back. And then here's some other fun pictures of us like prepping samples before it went onto the rocket. And I mean, this was a really good experience. Learned a lot about, you know, all of the different parts of research and all of the different ways that you can have biology interfacing with software, interfacing with mechanical engineering, and you know, just basic science design and things like that. But also was a good way to learn about the realities about how hard research can be. So one of the major setbacks in this project was we had gone down to Florida. We were there. We were going to watch the rocket launch. It was on a SpaceX rocket, and I don't know if any of you guys remember, but a couple of years ago, one of the SpaceX rockets exploded a couple minutes after launch. And so our experiment was on that rocket. And so all of it was probably a year and a half worth of work. And there was nothing we could do, right? The rocket exploded, everything on it exploded, all of the supplies that were going to the space station, all these things. So thankfully we were in a position to be able to try it again, kind of rebuild everything that we had, regrow our bacteria, and send it again. Because because, stuff like that happens, research, things go wrong and you have to start over sometimes. But I think for our team, one of the most important aspects of that was the fact that we were then able to update some of our designs, right? Nothing's ever perfect. And so there were definitely a couple parts of the experiment that got a lot better as soon as we had to do it again. So that was a good lesson to learn before going to college and doing some more research there. But yeah, it was fun, lots of fun.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. And that's definitely right that research does have many setbacks to it. So it's better that you learn it early and not late, or because it's a pretty low risk situation there. But apart from that, how did your experience with the research that you conducted in regards to International Space Station connect to like your college experience and maybe like other opportunities you got? I know you are a PBS like side girl, so how did that like connection form?
Yeah, so the organization that supported us in doing this experiment and conducting this whole project over a couple years was at the time it was called CASIS, the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space. Now they've rebranded and they are just the U.S. National Lab component of the International Space Station. So it's the U.S. lab space up there. And they have this program called Space Station Explorers that a lot of teachers and educators and other students who have also sent experiments to the station are a part of. And kind of the mission of that is to raise awareness that, one, there is an International Space Station with people on it, and it has been constantly occupied for about 22 years now. And it's always above us, and it's orbiting the planet, which is really cool. So that as a fact, and then also that there are opportunities for, like scientists who want to run experiments can request space and time up there, but also there's lots of student programs that allow students to do programs like I did, and then other similar ones. So for example, there's one where they take tomato seeds and they fly them on the station and then they bring them back. And then you can request a kit that has seeds that were flown on the station and ones that weren't. And then you grow them and you get to see which ones you think went to space and which ones didn't, and make hypotheses about how that might have impacted how the tomatoes would grow and stuff like that. So there's lots of programs kind of along those lines. So I've been to a couple conferences. This is a picture from one in support of that, and to talk to other people in the space industry about opportunities for students, because I mean, at least from my own experience, it was very pivotal in my decision to pursue STEM related things. So I'm a big advocate for people doing as much fun, cool science stuff as you can whenever you can. But so one of the things that came out of that was I was at a conference and was talking to some of the producers for Side Girls, and they were doing a special edition kind of in conjunction with the National Lab or the International Space Station Lab through the US. And so they came out to Chicago, and we walked around campus. We walked around. This was when I was in college, so it was a couple of years after the experiment had gone and all these things. But we walked around campus, and they kind of filmed me in my daily life. They asked me about the research that I was currently up to at the time, and the things that I like to do, and we just kind of walked around and got an idea of here are some things that are important to me as a scientist and as a mathematician, and also just a cool person in college doing fun stuff. So that was a really good experience, and it's just been really cool to stay involved with that organization, because again, it was very directly contributed to my desire to continue doing science and STEM in college and beyond. So
Yeah, that's awesome. that's a really cool opportunity that if I would have gotten, that would have been like life-changing. But what advice would you give to high schoolers who would like to conduct research similar to yours or just like research in general throughout high school?
Yeah. So I would say if you're in high school, I mean, depending on where you are, there's lots of opportunities. If you're near a university, they might have opportunities. You'll have to do some research. Want to keep this kind of general, but you know, keep your eyes open for things that sound interesting, especially in high school and early college. You know, you don't need to be doing things that are on a path. You should be trying a bunch of different stuff and trying to get a really wide variety of experiences, so that you can figure out what you like and what you don't like. So I think for me, one of the things that I really appreciated about our project was, right, it combined biology and some software stuff and hardware design and project management skills and, you know, things like that. And so that was a good opportunity because I got a lot of experience all in one. So even looking for stuff like that, starting your own projects, asking questions, and then, you know, trying to see what you can learn on your own or with the team that you build around you is always a good. And yeah, I think just look around and see what's out there. There are lots of organizations who are trying to do stuff like this and bring different opportunities to different groups of students. So I'll put some links in the chat at the end with some resources that I have found helpful or related to the things I'm talking about. So yeah.
Yeah, also speaking of the chat, if you guys have any questions or like clarification needed comments, feel free to just type them in the chat and then like both Abby and I can look at them and we can answer them like while we're talking about something else or like we can answer them specifically. But if you guys have any questions, like don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Like this is all for you guys. So moving on, it's from high school to college. You did major in computational and applied mathematics. What exactly like is that, and how is that different from other like majors like data science or just like computer science or anything else?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And I will preface this by saying I'm not sure I have a good answer for you because I think depending on who you talk to or what departments you're looking at different universities, they might have slightly different definitions of all of these things. But as this cute little cartoon kind of alludes to, applied math is trying to use mathematical tools in other fields. So things like, you know, there's a whole field of biomathematics, there's like mathematical finance, engineering is a big area of application, stuff like that. But it also is a wide field with lots of different subparts. So for example, classes that I took for my major were primarily in the math department, stat department, and computer science departments. So kind of the applied math portion of it was we did a lot of optimization and we did a lot of statistics and we did some probability and things of that nature. And then I guess that also encompasses the statistics part of it. I also took a biostatistics class in there and some machine learning classes, things of that nature. And then kind of going back to your question of comparing it to other fields like data science, for example. So I think there's a lot of overlap in all of these fields. They're all very interdisciplinary. And, you know, for example, if you can code in Python, odds are you can do some numerical simulations that are maybe more on the applied math side, but then you could also do some data analysis things that are more like data science. So in my mind, data science is more, you if you have a data set and you're trying to ask questions about whatever that data is like. So for example, if you have some data set that talks about, what's a good example? Maybe like housing prices in different parts of the country, and you want to ask questions about like, where a house is more expensive and how does that correlate with people's education levels, things like that. I would say those kinds of analyses are a little bit more in the data science camp, versus if you wanted to take that data set and you wanted to make a model that might, predict where the next, big housing crisis is going to be, where it's really hard for people to find houses because everyone wants to move there. Maybe that's more in the applied math camp. And then kind of adding the computational part on top of all of this. A lot of the work that I do, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, relies on using computers and using large data sets to do simulations and things. So there's lots of supercomputers involved, which is really exciting. And yeah, so they're all very interdisciplinary and related fields. And I think, there used to be a definition of applied math where it was very like you're doing like physics related things and maybe some biology related things. But I think kind of as time is going on, it's becoming a term that encompasses more and more areas of math and more areas of application, which is kind of cool. So I guess to go back to some of the classes that I've taken, I did a lot of statistics, like I said, biostatistics, machine learning, analysis, which is kind of like calculus, but like the next level of calculus. I did take calculus again as well. Linear algebra. I think everyone should take linear algebra. It's a very important foundation. Like if you want to do machine learning, for example, a lot of it is based on linear algebra. So that's my tip there. And yeah, I took a numerical analysis class. So, how do we use computers to solve functions that maybe you can't solve otherwise? There's lots of stuff like that as well. So.
Cool. Yeah. My next question would kind of be more in depth about like your college experience. I know you did like hint at like a bunch of classes that you took, but is there anything like specific that you would like to add on to about like your classes or activities that you were in during your college experience?
Yeah, so kind of on top of doing all of the class things, which is obviously very important when you go to college, but I think it's also very important to have fun and do other things. So some of the other stuff that I was involved in, so UChicago, I went to the University of Chicago, has a house system, kind of like Hogwarts. And so, we did a lot of intramural sports and stuff like that with our house. So that's this picture down here in the corner. I went swing dancing all the time, and we went to the aquarium and the museums and all the things that Chicago has to offer. I think it's important that when you're in college, you take time to actually experience the city that you're in or the town that you're in, because you're going to be there for 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what your college experience looks like. But it's good to get out and like explore the area around. So here we went to Indiana for the pierogi festival. That was fun. And here's just a shot of campus from one of the bell towers. But other things I did. Let's see, I played on the golf team for about a year, and then I started doing research. So I did that a little bit more. But yeah, that it's a good time. I think research was a big portion of that, which I think we're going to talk about next.
Yeah. So you majored in a STEM field and you minored in art, right? Like Mesoamerican art.
Oh,
So, um, how did you like that combo? Like, what did it show you about the importance of the A in STEM? So STEAM instead of just STEM.
yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I forgot to mention that I also minored in art history. Basically, I took a class from like core curriculum and really liked the professor and really liked the class. So I kind of just kept taking classes until I got a minor. Um, and for anyone who's not familiar, Mesoamerica is like ancient Mesoamerican art is kind of in Mexico and Central America and kind of that region of the world. But yeah, so one of the most interesting things that I think doing that in conjunction with my math degree taught me was that the the ways that you approach art history and the ways that you approach science are very, very similar. So one of the um, one of the um, things in art history, right? You're looking at a painting, you're looking at a sculpture, and you're looking at different aspects of it and being like, okay, these lines look like this, and the shading looks like this. What can that tell me about what the painting means? And what can I pull from the artist's life in order to maybe inform what I think they were trying to say? It's kind of similar in science, right? You're doing experiments, you're collecting data, and then you're pulling that data together with things that other people in your field have also learned and published in their own papers and trying to reason about the world around you. And so, uh, at least in my experience, I found that kind of doing the math, doing the science, and then doing the art history, writing papers for art history made me a much better writer in my scientific contexts. I think there's something about having to look really, really carefully at a piece of art and like pull out all of the data that you want to use that really focuses you and helps you build your argument. So that was a really valuable skill that I think everyone should be required to take art history classes to gain. But I also got to take a couple of classes that kind of combined my interest in STEM and art history. And so I took one called the Material Science of Art. And in this class, this is kind of related to the pictures I have up, but basically everybody got a project to do something relating to a piece of art and then something you wanted to answer about it. And so I was looking at this sculpture that was at the art museum on campus at UChicago that they believe had come from somewhere in Mesoamerica. But the thing about ancient art kind of in general, but art of the Americas as well, is that there are lots of fakes out there that have kind of cropped up over the years. And so there's definitely questions about whether or not this one is real because the museum got it just donated from somebody, so they don't know where it came from. And so, we learned a bunch of stuff in the class about, if you have a UV light and you put it over this kind of paint, it'll fluoresce this color. So you can kind of see that up here, right? Like it's a little hard to see in this one, but basically the tip of the nose rings are kind of like a dusty yellow color, but when you put them under a UV light, they turn this kind of like bluish color. And so that tells us about what kind of pigment it is. I think in this case, we decided it's probably like a titanium-based white paint that might have a varnish on it. But stuff like that. And then there are also units about, let's look for fractals in different paintings, which is a area of math. And so that was really exciting to me of like, how do you combine all of these things? And I think one of the other big things that it taught me is just how much of an opportunity that there is to right? If you have interest in STEM, but you also have interest in art, like those things definitely do not need to exist separately. Just as an example, like conservation science in a museum is, you know, basically the combination of art history and material science and chemistry. And, you know, there are real like hardcore labs in museums because they have to do, right, if you're trying to conserve a painting, for example, right, and you're trying to match up the color that is present on the painting with some other pigment that you have, you want to know what that pigment is on the painting before you put anything on it, because if you don't, you might put something on it that'll ruin it, and then you've ruined a piece of artwork that's in a museum, and probably don't want to be doing that. So there's, you know, a whole subfield of conservation science of, you know, how do we identify pigments, especially works that are really, really old, right? I'm pretty sure these artists weren't just writing down what they were mixing together to make all these paints. I mean, we know even contemporary artists will sometimes mix like spray paint with some oil paints, with some acrylic paints, with some flowers they found outside, and then, you know, who knows what that's going to do when you put something on it if you need to conserve it. And so I think that's also a really exciting intersection of these things. And then just as another example, so the Art Institute in Chicago is one of a couple museums in the country that has a lot of this scientific equipment in-house so that they can do these analyses by themselves. And so again, as part of that class, we went to the Art Institute and we kind of looked around their lab space, and like this picture over here is an example where they were x-raying the painting to see if there was anything underneath or like anything caught in the frame that could tell them anything new about it. I just think there are a lot of really fun, exciting, interesting projects happening now and happening every day that are, you know, people taking their science or their computer science or their machine learning or their math algorithms and putting it into an artistic context to help us better understand all of these things. And I mean, it goes both ways, right? So art history and the arts and all of these other fields. I mean, there are other examples of STEM being used for art purposes. I think like audio and like music engineering is a good example, right? Like how do you create the best music that you can? But there's plenty of examples of, right, we need art in order to make STEM much better. I'm sure you've all seen examples of ugly graphs or things that people are trying to communicate that just don't make any sense and would be so much better if everyone had a little bit better literacy in art and color theory and all of these things. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, as well as, you know, one of the worst things that you can do as a scientist is be bad at communicating your science by making your plots and your graphs and all these things look really ugly and incomprehensible. So at least in my opinion, you need to know a little bit about art in order to make your science more communicable, and then help share it with as many people as possible. So
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for reiterating that STEM and art are not two separate things, but also like parts of a whole. But I know you did major in STEM, so let's talk more about your STEM research. What were some of your like college research projects and internships like?
yeah. So I think I'll just talk about like the two biggest ones. I have like another one in there that is not as important. But so for the majority of my time at college, I worked in a microbiology, microbial ecology lab. So there were people doing wet lab experiments, you know, trying to grow bacteria that they got from various environments. A lot of us studied the bacteria that's in the human gut, for example, and there were some people studying bacteria that's in the ocean. And I mean, bacteria is everywhere on Earth, so you could pick an environment and there's probably somebody studying it somewhere. But I was focusing on the human gut, and I wasn't doing any wet lab work, so I wasn't pipetting anything, I wasn't sequencing any data. I was using data that other people had produced and using some pretty powerful computers at the University of Chicago and other places to try to understand the genomes and the genes that are in the genomes of the bacteria we're looking at, and what that can tell us about what those bacteria can do, how they might be interacting with the human body, the types of things that they can produce, all kinds of questions. We can learn a lot by looking at the DNA sequence from different organisms, and especially when it comes to bacteria. So this is just a poster that I presented in Germany a couple summers ago at a conference, which was really fun. And yeah, I also worked at the Chicago Transit Authority, just as a completely different experience. I was a data science intern for them, and basically this is not going to sound that exciting, I'm just going to say that, but I thought it was fun. Basically, I was looking at the warranties that go on all of the bus components and all the train components. And so the CTA spends a lot of money to get warranties on all these parts so that if they break, they can take it back to the manufacturer and say, hey, your part broke before it was supposed to. Give us a replacement one or give us some money for one. But the CTA is a huge organization with thousands of buses and thousands of trains, and they have these huge databases with all of this information about which components are under warranty and which ones aren't, and when they go under warranty or when they stop being under warranty, things like that. And so I was looking at those databases to try to answer questions about, which kinds of components are we not collecting money on that we should have been, and are there certain garages in the system that are doing a better job at collecting warranty money than others, and what are they doing differently over some of the garages that are doing a worse job and stuff like that. Plus we also got to go look at where they fix the trains, and so this picture here is basically they have it up on some risers and they can crawl underneath and fix the bottom of the train, which is really cool. And yeah, I mean, they're both two very different fields, but very similar skills. Like my day-to-day was a lot of programming, a lot of making graphs and figures and sending reports to people, especially in the CTA one. Making a lot of reports so that I could communicate my findings to other people who had the ability to implement some change, and a lot of presenting as well, especially with the one that I did in the lab on campus. That one had a lot of presenting in it. So yeah, got some good various research experiences.
Cool, yeah. How were you able to get these research opportunities and internships? Was there a specific path that you went down, or any initiatives that you took, etc.?
Yeah, good question. And I think that's definitely the part that is the most confusing when you're trying to look for research opportunities in your life. So for the one in the microbiology lab, I was taking a class, and the professor for that class mentioned some software. The class was about microbiome science related things. So very similar to the type of research I was doing in this lab, just in a much shorter classroom experience. And so the professor mentioned some software that sounded really interesting, and I looked it up after the class, and I found that a professor at the University of Chicago made it, and I kind of looked at his lab website, and I was like, oh wow, their projects look really interesting. And I told my TA this, and she was like, oh, you should just email him and see if you can work in his lab, which had never even occurred to me as a thing to do. I was going into my sophomore year of college, or yes, yes. This was like right at the end of the summer. And she was like, oh, you should just email him and see if you can meet him when you're on campus. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And so, I mean, thank goodness she said that to me, because it turned out to be a really awesome experience working with them. And so, yeah, I sent him an email being like, hey, I saw this software, I was taking this class. It looks really interesting. Can I meet with you when I'm on campus? And then, from there, they were like, we've got some projects that we think are interesting, but nobody has the time to do. We'll just give you one of those and we'll see what happens. And, they gave me a couple different options, and I picked the one that sounded the most interesting to me. And then it continued to be interesting for me for the next 3 years. So, that was really good. And then the CTA one is a little funny. Basically, I knew I was going to be in Chicago for that summer. I did as a summer internship. And I was taking the bus and the train like every single day leading up to the summer. And the way it works in Chicago is you get a bus pass during the school year, but you don't get one over the summer. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I can work at the CTA and maybe I can get a bus pass out of it. I mean, on top of that, I also just really like the bus and the train system in Chicago. I think it's super cool, and I mean, you can get anywhere with not a lot of effort. So I don't know, there's something very interesting to me about like, how do you move people through a system like that and keep it all working. And so I was curious about how it goes down behind the scenes too. But just that one really was, I was thinking about, okay, I need a research experience for the summer. I need an internship, something. What are things that I'm already doing that could be interesting? And then I was sitting on the train and was like, oh, I wonder if they're hiring. And then, from there kind of looked it up and I was like, oh yeah, they have summer interns. Why not? So, from that perspective, I think thinking about the things that you already like to do or the things that already interest you, and then looking for ways that organizations like that might have internships or research opportunities or something like that. I think is a good place to start if you're overwhelmed by the whole idea of like, what is research, who even knows, like, start with your classes. Is this class interesting? Talk to your professor, see if your professor has any ideas. Maybe they're taking people, who knows. Or things in your daily life, maybe those organizations are hiring, stuff like that. And those are very natural places to start. And then you can kind of go on from there, looking for other things. So.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned earlier that you have experience in many different areas of science, like biology earlier, then like material science, now like the bus transit system. So, in your experience, like how hard is it to switch between like different focuses of research in different areas?
Good question. I mean, it is a little tricky to, I mean, whenever you start something new, you have to learn a bunch of new information in order to kind of get your footing and understand what's happening. And I think with all of these, there's definitely been a learning curve for me, right? So I had never, I basically learned how to use databases while I was doing the CTA internship. And then I was also learning, what are all the components of a bus? How does all of that interact with ridership and other places in the organization? So, I think probably the most important thing to think about is that anyone starting in any field is going to have a lot to learn. And so if you're jumping around, just be patient with yourself, because you are going to have a little bit of time to learn all of the basics before you can like really get into stuff. And that's totally fine. And that is just the nature of jumping around. I think another important thing to know is that, so for me, I'm coming into a lot of these positions being, right, I have a math background, I have a stats background, I can code, things like that. And so for me, I'm looking for opportunities, and I'm jumping around to different places because those are skills that I can apply to a bunch of different fields. And so I think that it is a little bit like if you have some skills that are easily transferable and you don't have to completely learn or relearn, how to make a graph, or, how to analyze data, or, things like that every time you go into a new field, that can be pretty helpful for if you are interested in jumping around and trying a lot of things, because a lot of the time, right, databases are used in a lot of different fields. Python's used in a lot of different fields. And so if you can get a little bit of proficiency with those things, then if you're jumping around, you just have to learn a little bit about, like, the practices in each field, how the data is collected, things like that, that'll allow you to make informed decisions when you are analyzing data, for example, or something like that. So at least for me, I look for opportunities to do this. I definitely am still in a phase of my career where I want to see as many different fields as possible and kind of gain experience in a lot of different things. And, just because I have a degree and I have previous experience in other fields doesn't mean I'm tied to them. I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute too, but, I think if you are interested in seeing a lot of different areas, it is worthwhile to, take the time to apply for a lot of different things, jump around between different fields, and then, when you get there, learn the background, and then do the data analysis or the modeling or the simulations that you want to do, if you're coming in with a background like mine, I should say.
Nice. That's some pretty valuable advice right there. So I know a lot of people might feel anxious about starting off and deciding their whole future when they're like in high school. But it's good to hear that as long as you have like transferable skills, then you can switch from one area to the other, even though you might have to learn some basic things for the different field. But in regards to switching, you are currently doing some post-bac research at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Could you give maybe like a brief description of like what your research is and like how you enjoy it?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'm actually currently in New Mexico. I'm doing that right now. And is this gonna work? There we go. Basically, what I've been working on is developing software that does some statistical analyses that are going to be used for engineering analysis. So the idea is that there's the group that I work in, there's a bunch of people who are analysts, who are engineering analysts. They look at different materials that could be used to build parts, and different geometries for how to build different parts. And then we try to look at which of those options, so which of those materials, which of those geometries or configurations are going to give us the part that can withstand the highest temperatures or the most vibration, shaking, or something like that, depending on what the context is. And so the part that I'm working on is, right, you run these models and you want to know how well they did, and you want to be able to say, you want to quantify, you want to put a number on, it did this well. We were within some margin of our target, something like that. And so what I'm doing is building some software to make that type of statistical analysis easier for other analysts to do. And so the pictures I have up on the screen are basically going from, we work with a lot of probability distributions. We're doing Bayesian statistics, if you're familiar with that concept at all. But the idea is that you're going to have some values and they're going to have some probability distribution on them. But if you also have some experimental data, you can put that and anything you know about those values and put them together and then get a better idea of what the distribution on those values should be. And yeah, so basically just makes it easier to understand how much the values in a certain model could change. So that's been fun. And then I'm kind of also working on another project in another group that involves putting a lot of experimental data, again, into a database. I do a lot of database work apparently, so that in the future we can run big machine learning projects, because those require a lot of data. And as soon as you kind of put them all into one place, it's a lot easier for you to build those machine learning projects up later. So that's kind of investing in the future of the group, but that's also kind of material model based, trying to understand, if you have a block of aluminum and you smash it, like what's it going to do? And then other more complicated materials that are composites or a combination of a lot of other materials. So yeah, it's a little bit different than some of the other things I've done. It's kind of in the material science vein, computational physics vein, like it's kind of all in there. So it's, again, another new field, and I've had to learn what all of the experiments are that are generating all this experimental data, for example, but it's been really worthwhile, and I actually really like working here and living in New Mexico, so it's been good.
Nice. So now that we're nearing the end of our college and career talk, what advice or closing thoughts would you give to members of the audience who want to pursue a STEM career in the future, or just as a female in STEM? What closing thoughts would you have on those two areas?
Yeah, good question. So I think probably, I have a lot of thoughts. So I think if you are, I've kind of said this all throughout, but I'll reiterate it again. Especially in high school and especially early in college and even through the end of college, resist the temptation to feel like you need to have it all figured out, and that you know exactly what your life path is going to be, and that you know exactly what's happening. So it's, you absolutely do not need to have all those things figured out. And the more you can do to explore and ask questions and learn about other people's experiences, the better off things will be. So, talk to your teachers about their paths. If you know parents or friends' parents who do STEM related things, ask them about it. Something that I found really helpful for when I don't have people in my own field near me. Twitter's been really doing different programs. Don't just focus on how prestigious a program is. I know there's also a lot of pressure to do things that are the most impressive sounding, but that's not always the best thing for your career. So, resist that temptation as well. And then, specifically on the being a woman in STEM portion of this question, STEM needs you, STEM needs women, and we have a lot to offer and bring to the field. And don't let anyone tell you that that's not true. When people are like, if you hear people talking, they're like, oh, women shouldn't do math, that is absolutely not correct. oh, women shouldn't do engineering, shut that down wherever you can. That is completely incorrect. And if people are going to try to push you out of the field or make you feel bad for being there, fight them on that. You deserve to do things that you are interested in, and the field is better for having us there. Okay. And then I guess the other kind of thought I have on that is, there's we don't have a fix for sexism, and so the best that we can do is to support each other. So find whatever situation you're in, any STEM environments, find a community of women who are also there, get to know them, and lift each other up through everything, support each other through everything. Some of my best friends are women that I've met through my math classes, where we were one of two there, and we were there backing each other up and supporting each other. So I think, yeah, the most important things are things that have helped me get through the more difficult portions of, people saying you don't belong or things like that, is having a community of women and supporting each other and lifting each other up as much as possible. We don't, it's hard enough as it is. Don't be tearing down other women in science. We don't need each other. We don't need to be fighting each other. So those are my thoughts on that. I said I would put a couple links and things in the chat, so I will do that, as well as my email, in case anyone has any other questions afterwards. So yeah, with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby, for sharing your experiences and just like any advice that you had for like members of the audience. It was just really amazing to hear all the different experiences that you've had as a female in STEM. So once again, thank you so much for being our guest speaker. And thank you to everyone in the audience for attending our first ever college and career talk. If you guys have any questions, comments about the event or any future events that would be coming up, please do not hesitate to go visit our website. The link is on the screen, and also contact us through our email. So that's it, you guys. Thank you once again, and hopefully we will see you another time.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Bye.